George Harrison's story with Paul McCartney began on a Liverpool school bus in the early 1960s. George, a quiet and impressionable teenager, bonded with Paul over chords, records, and a shared love of skiffle and rock and roll. McCartney, older and confident, quickly recognized George's potential. When George auditioned for John Lennon's Quarrymen in 1958, his youth was a concern, but his guitar skills impressed both Lennon and McCartney. That moment paved the way for his entry into what would become the Beatles, the quiet Beatle. From the beginning, George Harrison found himself in the shadow of Lennon and McCartney. They were the primary songwriters, crafting the band's identity while George absorbed, learned, and followed. Initially, admiration was enough, but as fame grew, his quiet temperament earned him the nickname the Quiet Beatle. Behind the calm exterior, however, he was increasingly frustrated. Musical ideas were overlooked, guitar contributions second-guessed, and his voice often drowned out. His patience was tested, creating a silent but growing resentment. Strains within the studio. By the late 1960s, George's frustration had hardened. During the White Album sessions, he had matured as a songwriter and musician, but studio dynamics left him stifled. Paul McCartney's perfectionism and de facto leadership often clashed with George's creative instincts. John Lennon's distracted presence only exacerbated tensions. The Let It Be sessions exposed these fractures. George's calm confrontation over Two of Us symbolized years of artistic suffocation. The subtle resignation marked a turning point, as George temporarily walked away from the band on January 10, 1969. Creative independence. Returning under renegotiated terms, George began asserting himself through songs like Something and Here Comes the Sun. These masterpieces revealed his talent when unburdened by control. Yet the quiet rift with Paul had deepened. Even as the Beatles approached their breakup in 1970, George's estrangement was both professional and deeply personal. While the public focused on Lennon-McCartney tensions, George was quietly severing emotional ties. His creative freedom came at the cost of lingering bitterness, which would influence his later reflections on their complex relationship. Life after the Beatles. Post-Beatles, George Harrison cultivated a reputation as a thoughtful solo artist, philanthropist, and spiritual seeker. Despite his peaceful exterior, old wounds remained. Interviews revealed a measured, reflective tone, often tinged with irony. When asked about Paul, he rarely answered directly, instead offering philosophical observations. Harrison's approach reflected his belief in subtle truth-telling over public dramatics. Though decades later he met Paul privately, their reconciliation was quiet and intimate, marked by gestures and conversation that contrasted sharply with their younger, fraught years. Legacy and reflection. George Harrison passed away on November 29, 2001, surrounded by loved ones, leaving behind a legacy of music, spirituality, and quiet rebellion. His relationships, especially with Paul, remained layered with unspoken tension and partial forgiveness. Though George and Paul shared moments of closeness before his death, full reconciliation may have never been achieved. Harrison's silence and resilience reflected a life lived beyond fame, proving that sometimes the loudest statements are made quietly, through music, principle, and personal integrity.